Your Excellency, Abdul Basit, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I think we are, this is a great setting because SMBs, as Mr. Abdul Basit said, contribute to over 62% of the economy of the UAE, probably even more now. And if you take out the oil industries, even the oil industry has got many SMBs that are working on it. It is 90% of the employment in most countries are generated by SMBs. Let's all give a big hand to SMBs because they provide the most employment, take the risk, pay the salary, unlike people who work in large companies and organizations. Just imagine, they are truly the heroes. Without them, none of the big companies, none of us would be here. Please give yourselves a big hand. And I saw some of the winners today, and what I was thinking about, I can see some of them will definitely be on the cover of, Fast Company or Fortune, Forbes, and all this. I love the Beehive, because some of the stuff that I'm going to talk here, and the Uber of trucks, I forgot the name of the company, the video guide, they're amazing. What they're doing is something so amazing. They're actually, I do not know if they thought through about this strategically, but when you look at my presentation, you can see that's exactly what these folks are doing. It's amazing. Really, it's amazing, and can't believe that these things exist in this part of the world. So the topic today is, how do SMEs disrupt the established incumbents? As outliers, how do they do it? So before I continue, let's not forget the past. All those, from countries, Japan Incorporated to Merrill Lynch, all these were disruptors in the past. And, they disrupted some countries, the motor car industry, what Telsa is doing, or Toyota did in the old days with the Big Four in Detroit. So all these are disruptors. And tomorrow, I'm very sure that Dubai will be one of the disruptors. As Mr. Abdul Basit said, despite the economic conditions, I think we're all very blessed to be here. This is one of the most bullish market with the highest potential, because people think of this not just in terms of the 7 to 10 million people that are here, putting aside the growth. This area actually covers 3 billion people surrounding it. Think about this. All the OECD economies, growth is flattening. Take Europe and Japan and so forth. Everywhere growth is flattening. You either can invent new products or go to new markets. You take this region, it serves South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Where do you think all the MNCs will come in? You look at Middle East, all the conflict that's happening around our region, but that's all short term. Think about the seismic changes that are happening here. It is going to move, things are going to happen when a pool of educated people get together, people will come out of the ruts. Think about Africa. It's untouched, virgin Africa. Where do you think all those established businesses will come? It's in Dubai. So all of you who won and all of you are doing business, I think we're in for a fantastic time. I wish I had been here 25, 30 years ago, because imagine the potential of this land. We are blessed here. So I believe Dubai will be one of the disruptors in the world market, how Japan was in the 50s and 60s. I really believe that. Now, let's look at most companies. The life cycle of most companies are very short. Most companies do not last very long, unlike what we think. We think it's a big established brand. So somebody did a great study to look at the Standard & Poor's 500 brands. And they did a great study. What they found out was the average life cycle of companies, since when they could track it, was 60 years. Then it dropped to 50, 40. Now they predict that the average life of companies is about 20 years. Why is this so? These are big, large corporations that are being displaced. It doesn't mean that you have a great brand is going to happen. Look at some of the old brands, the new brands that entered the S&P 500 index and the brands that exited from that. Things keep happening. Things keep moving because disruptors, SMBs, some unknown SMBs working somewhere to make it happen. Think about it. You will not know. This is just an actual slide of the companies that have global brands that exited out of the index and new brands that are coming in. So do not think every incumbent is in this modern world is susceptible to disruption, total disruption. And we all know the famous saying, the company that owns the biggest content is a company that owns no content, which is Facebook, or the biggest transportation company owns no cars, or the biggest hotel has no assets on its own. If you think about this, it's amazing and it's true. Think about the change that is happening. And the reason for that is that incumbents or traditional large companies with traditional global brands What they do, they look at the requirements, and then they design, and then they do the development, testing, and deploy. And the cycle just continues. This is the way they do it. And the way they do it, and when new entrants come into the market, they're full of overconfidence. There's two great books I want to remind you to read, if you can. One is an old book, which is one of the bestsellers in 1997. It was written by Professor Clayton Christensen. I think most of you must have heard about it, The Innovator's Dilemma. In that book, what he did, he tracked the global disk storage industry. And over a period of 20 years, what he said is that the new attackers are able to attack not because the incumbents are stupid or dumb. That's what most people think, but they're not. Just imagine they have their quarterly earnings, the quarterly growth, the yearly growth that they have to achieve. So when you come in something new, they can't do that. They have to go into and making sure they grow the incremental revenue on the existing base, while some new guy comes and boom. And meanwhile, just imagine the management sitting around and talking, this thing is going to affect, they're full of confidence, they said, no, it's not going to happen. Then suddenly it becomes too late before somebody takes over your industry. This is what's happening that we see all over. And I really think Beehive is going to be one of those industries that's going to do that. You know, people do not realize that. Imagine the potential of this country. Imagine the potential of, disrupting the financial ecosystem here. I think it's an amazing opportunity. It goes for trucks as well. And I'll give you a few other examples, which I think there's a huge opportunity here. And the reason for that, incumbents today, most of the established companies, 70% of their shareholder returns today, the profits come from just extending the product life cycle. Then they try to do something new, it's what we call sustaining innovation. It normally doesn't happen. This is where all their focus is, but the actual money is coming from somewhere else. And nobody has any empowering or long-scale innovation. They can't do it because they are tied to their current way of thinking, their current way of doing that. Now, and as we all know, any new innovative disruption that is happening in the market is coming from a new player that goes and attacks in a different market space at a very low cost. So you can imagine, it's always going to happen. It's all going to be SMBs. That's how they do it. Now let's take a look at how they do it. If you look at this graph, on the y-axis is performance. Performance in terms of product features, benefits, and so forth. On the x-axis, you have time. So let's say you're a hotel or you're a limousine company that is targeting a very high end. You're going and you start growing, you extend it. Great friend does service, check out a tree, free bouquet of flowers and fruits, all those wonderful things you do at the high end. Of course, if you have a huge investment, you go to every segment. Or you take a low end taxi company versus a limo company. You start targeting the lows end, but the growth and changes that you do is very linear. What the new entrant does, it comes in, it disrupts the whole market, and the performance is so high. And it just happens suddenly, it becomes too late for those guys. So I can see the 6 winners here today, this is exactly what they're doing. And it's amazing that, so when we listen to the newspapers or read the magazines and we hear about all these fantastic companies, LinkedIn and Twitter and all these companies, it didn't happen like that. There's a method to the madness. What they do, they change the marketplace, they come in very cheap, and they just disrupt across the segments. This is what they're doing. Let's take, for example, Airbnb. Airbnb, it's, you can say it's direct competition or relative competition of the large, very luxurious 5-star or 7-star hotels to the small motels, to the apartment hotels and people who rent out. What they have done, they cut across the segment and they have done this. So it's amazing what is happening. So every SMB that is sitting here and doing something, it's going to happen. This is how they do it. Now, how do they do it? First, they introduce a new concept. Then the quality is not so good. Then they improve on the quality because they go at a certain very small segment that's looking for something cheaper. And then they start attacking the established incumbent. They start attacking the established incumbent, and then they improve on it, and then they go and remodel the whole market. This is what they do. So it's, when you look at all those fantastic companies that have come up so far, it's amazing how they do it. First, something very new, something very disruptive. Then the quality may not be that great. Then what they do, they start attacking the incumbent, the existing guy, because they improve, they learn from the quality, because their costs are very low. And that's what most SMBs are doing today, which we are not even heard of. And then they radically change the product, and then they boom, it's too late for the other guys who are sitting very happy and overconfident. So you can imagine the potential, and many things are happening here. But the unfortunate thing for us, you know, it reminds me of a concept called the Providence Paradox. You know, you can buy a Swiss chocolate, you have to pay maybe $19, but a Chilean chocolate might cost even $50. But it's because the brand, the mentality, and so forth. In the old days, Japan means quality. And I know Dubai will be at the top of the Providence Paradox in time to come. It will be. Let's make that happen. But that's also important. While we do this, so there are many companies that are doing stuff here, but in order for it to take out, the whole ecosystem needs to be here. So that's what is happening. And you know, this is a great information. I got it off the web, but I thought I wanted to share. And the reason for this disruption, you know, in 1962, some great guy in marketing concept, you know, the early adopters, then all the way to the majority, to the laggards, and the classic S cycle that we all know. Anybody who's done marketing, is marketing 101. But if you look at it today, it is not the case. What happens is that it's an exponential take-up, more like a shark fin curve, and then it drops. A great example of this happening, you can see today it's happening right in front of us. Over a shorter period of time, a big adoption curve, Twitter. I mean, you can see it happening. You remember 2-3 years ago, it was a big deal to have 10,000 followers, 100,000 followers. But today, you can see, and I can see some others coming. You know, I hope LinkedIn is not here, but I can see if they don't change pretty soon, it's going to happen. Young kids today, instead of Facebook, they're talking about Snapchat. So you can see the curve is not that old. Imagine the old phone system. It took 100 years of evolution. And imagine the time span, because technologies are enabling that to happen. It's a shark fin curve, you know. And because the cost is so low, and why is this? Why is this so? Because the digital world enables, you know, so many more investors and innovators to come into the market at the cost that is very much more less, and the efficiency and the capabilities, the features, the benefits that it offers is 100 times more. So you can imagine this is going to happen, and incumbents are going to be disrupted. There's enough enabling technologies that enable that. And what is that? What is those technologies? Think about this for a second. This is a great chart, and you can, if you look at any of the examples you have, Airbnb, GitHub, Kickstarter, any one of them, even Beehive, you know what they're doing today. The old days, if you talk about Internet 101, the organization addressed the stakeholder needs, it goes down. Then we moved on to the stage where it goes two ways. And then you have artificial intelligence, you have analytics, you have robotics, all those capabilities that are happening today that enables them to give the feedback. And today we're in an era, take Uber for example. It is not just you give a rating on the driver, you give a rating on also the passenger, or Airbnb with the guest versus the actual, the landlord. You know, plus the surrounding areas, the surrounding ecosystem, the cleaners, so forth. So you can imagine the meshing of networks enables trust. And this is enabled today in the digital world. So you do not know what is happening today in some guy, some SMB sitting somewhere and doing this. What they do, they change the marketplace, come in at a low cost, change the environment, attack the investor, and boom, lo and behold. But the curve might be very short because the digital, somebody else is coming with something fast, as I said about a Twitter example. And this is nothing new. I just want to show, because if you look at the top left-hand side, some great surge happened in the past, of course. It happens every 60 years. You can see that the power industry, the road industry, the automobile industry, or even my industry, the telecom industry, from the analog world, it went to the digital. Suddenly, infrastructure was set up. You know, everybody comes in. The dot-com bubble happened. Stabilization happens. Then the technology gets better. And, you know, now we're in the golden age. And then it matures, eventually it matures. Something new is happening at the same time. The next generation surge is going to happen. And we all know artificial intelligence is happening at a rate that is so unbelievable, on bionics, on things, developments in electronics and human body, you know, moving away from the fuel economy. So all those changes are also going to happen. It happens every 60 years or so. Some great person has done this study, and it's so true. So all those SMBs sitting and working, they're going to disrupt some incumbent. It's definitely going to happen. And this is a great book that I have, and I recommend you all read. It's called Exponential Organization. is written by Salim Ismail. It's an amazing book that really, it is actually written for large corporations how to compete in the digital space and be an exponential organization. But it is very relevant. You can clearly see how they're doing it. So what, if you have the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, so what he called the idea side and the scale side. So what is enabling these SMBs to do, how they're disrupting? The staff on demand, we all know. Staff on demand doesn't mean anybody. There are certain work, like drivers, you do, staff on demand. Then there's community and crowd, like open source. There is an outer community and inner community that does the development, that just makes it better, gives it comment. Then they have algorithms that sort of predict, can just give them information, who is doing what, where, so they can better it. Then on top of that, they have leverage assets, just like the trucking Uber. I forgot the name, forgive me. The trucking Uber company here, they don't have any assets. Airbnb doesn't have any assets. Think about it, they're leveraging. Even Beehive is not putting a lot of capital, it's just enabling a platform to do that. And they're scaling up just like that. And of course, the engagements with the customers, the community is built. The same thing happened on the left side of the brain, the ideas. All of them have interfaces that enable customers to interface. Think about it. And then they have dashboards. Dashboards to do their own key performance indicator, to know how they're performing, who is doing what, when do I scale up, when do I go down, when do I stop. All this information is there. Then they can fine-tune it better.